Now, the CRL Rights Commission is hosting its inaugural National Customary Initiation Indaba this week. The Commission says this is aimed at reducing the number of deaths at schools across the country. Now, the issue of illegal initiation schools will also be dealt with. For more, let's bring in Professor David Mosoma, who's the chair of the CRL Rights Commission, joining us this morning via our video link. Doc, it's great to see you. Thanks, as always, for making time. I wonder if you believe that you've got the right people in the room, because we do know that there are multiple stakeholders, so to speak, who are involved in ensuring that we actually finally get this right after decades of long-standing challenges.
I have the right group in the room, and the reason for saying this is that the Act says the responsible person in convening the initiation school are the kings and the queens. So I have them in the room. So whatever happens lies squarely in the hands of the kings and the queens, because in terms of the Act, they're the ones responsible in ensuring that whenever initiation is convened, they take full accountability and responsibility.
Yeah. So there's what the Act and legislation says, and there's what happens
Indeed.
On the ground, right? And that's actually what I was getting to in my first question there. Even with the law in place, even with that responsibility lying with the kings and queens, we've seen parents giving their children away to schools that aren't registered, schools that shouldn't be operating.
Now, this is a point which is critical in terms of educating the parents in the environment in which the kings and the queens are. Now, this requires cooperative collaboration, both in terms of the kings and queens, the CRL Commission, and other stakeholders, the parents, the Department of Health, SAPS, and so forth and so on. This is a collective responsibility. When I say I have the people in the room, I mean it, because in all environments, people would not act if they are not actually guided in the manner in which they are supposed to be guided. So it is our responsibility. Once we have the Act, we have the legislation. The legislation must bite. The legislation must work. We can't have the legislation and just use it as just a by the way.
Mm. No, you're absolutely right about that. And the obvious question, I suppose, is in what ways are you going to ensure that what you've just mentioned is actually carried out, right? Because the point I'm making is that the legislation has always been there.
Remember the legislation, it's 2021 Customary Initiation Act, which is very comprehensive, and it put in place all the provisions necessary to safeguard the safety, health, and the security of the initiates. This is one of the most comprehensive acts. So I want to give teeth to this particular act in order to obviate a situation in which our young men die when they go to the initiation school. As I indicated yesterday, culture does not kill. So we blame culture, while in fact people use culture as a pretext to do what they have to do. See, you know. Yeah. So this is an important point for us.
Right. And I suppose another thing worth considering is what you reckon is actually at the heart of the issue, right? Because in my mind, this is not an ideological question, right? It's not even a cultural question. Most people who take part in this rite of passage believe in its value. So what does it come down to, you know, for people who find themselves dealing with illegal initiation schools? Is it a monetary issue? And if that's the case, how do we approach that?
There are two things. There are young men who go to legal schools, some of whom end up dying or experiencing amputation, mutilation. There are those who go to illegal schools. And the illegal schools, sometimes they abduct these young men. They don't even seek permission from the parents. As we have heard yesterday, parents coming before us and say, this is the situation. My son was actually abducted, and he ended up dying. And this guy comes to us and says, listen, your son dies through natural deaths, natural causes. But this is because we have allowed a situation where the law does not bite. When you say something is illegal, it is illegal. There's no wishy-washy about it. If it's illegal, it's illegal. And I want to say, people must now know, when we say illegal circumcision must not be permitted, and the law enforcement agency must actually assist in doing that, weed out the illegal, so that we can deal with the legal ones and see where the challenges are with regard to the legal ones.
Yeah. Do you reckon you've got enough buy-in from the people who could go a long way in assisting you? And that's essentially just the people who are part of the practice itself. You know, if there's going to be anybody who's going to be effective, arguably even more than law enforcement, it's those who are custodians of the culture.
Indeed, as I said, I have them in the room. And this is a watershed national endeavor to really, as a people, agree that we can't allow a nation that prides itself in seeing its young men die in the manner in which they have died. This is an indictment in the soul and consciousness of our nation. And we can do better than that.
Yeah. Part of what the conference is also trying to do is to try and learn from best practice from other provinces. I wonder what you've been able to learn through that process.
Today, we have commissions, so to speak, and that's where there is going to be some kind of exchange with regard to best practice, so that we can identify where the real challenges are. And if it means that we can reinforce the existing mechanisms or measures, let's do so. If it means that new ones have to come up with in terms of making sure that our young men are protected and safeguarded, so be it. But I think since yesterday and I of course experience what is going to happen today, but today we are seeking actually answers, solutions, practicable solutions, which we can put in place to make sure that we rescue this cultural practice of initiation from being, criminalized, distorted, and abused.
Sure. When you speak about these new mechanisms, I wonder to what extent you reckon there's an appetite for change in a way that might look like culture itself is changing. Let me try and explain what I mean by that. We know that culture itself has never been static. You know, it's always moved and has responded to the needs of the people who practice it at a particular time. If we find, for instance, that we've had the kind of, technological development that allows us to even go about carrying out these rituals in different venues as a start, from your current engagements, are you getting a sense that there is an appetite to even go that far in the reform process in order to save lives, essentially?
We have not got to that debate as yet. Maybe we'll test that debate today to see whether there is an appetite to go beyond as a part of the expression of an evolutionary, dynamic cultural expression, whether we can look for other ways in which we can enhance this. But I do know that other provinces already, they are using medical circumcision as part of that. But others are really resisting against that as something which is uncultural, which is not going, in support of their way of life. So there is a lot of debate, but we'll see as we go on. But the underlying principle here is that there must be a zero death. That's the underlying principle. Whatever we agree on, the underlying principle, the penultimate principle, is that there should be a zero death in our initiation schools.
Yeah. In the midst of that disagreement, it sounds to me like there is a bit of a distance still to travel in order for there to be consensus around how we should fix this so that there is accountability. So let me ask this question. Tomorrow is the last day of the commission, of the particular conference. What does a successful conference look like to you by the time you close shop tomorrow?
For me, if we can agree on 2 or 3 things, I don't want a litany of agreements, 1 or 2 things. How do we make sure that our young men go to initiation school alive and come back alive? If I can get an answer to that concretely, then the conference has been successful.
All right. Professor David Mosoma, thanks very much indeed for speaking to us. Hopefully you get those crystal clear answers, especially given what's at stake. We appreciate your time. He's the chairperson of the CRL Rights Commission, and it's a story we've been watching for decades, isn't it? You know, season in and season out, we speak about deaths at initiation schools. Hopefully this Indaba will put a close to that particular tragedy.